And here we are. Welcome to AUVSI 2017 Exponential. We're here with the boss, Brian Wynne. We're so pleased to be able to work with you today. I walked into here this morning, got a chance to see a phenomenal opening session, especially with the work done by Northrop Grumman and Intel. And Intel really talk about strutting your stuff. But it was obvious that there was a tremendous sense of energy, almost destiny in the room. And I would imagine at this stage of the game, from where you're sitting, all you can see is the work that you got to do.
Well, I forget who I'm quoting that talked about standing in acres of diamonds. You can't pick them all up at the same time. And not to say that there aren't some challenges in there, some rocks to break. But I think this event is really demonstrating that we've successfully expanded the industry, from the military side into the commercial side. We've also got military folks here. We've got counter UAS going on here. There's a lot of different elements to the way the show and the community is expanding that are really on display here. I'll say it that way.
Before we get into looking to the future, let's talk a little bit about the past. Where did AUVSI come from? What was the vision or the dream that drove the organization? Because there's a lot of history to it that I've been reading up on, and this was not an overnight process.
No, the organization started 45 years ago at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I'm a student of history, so I'm still looking for the people that founded the organization and to thank them, because they clearly had a vision. This was post-Vietnam days where there were a lot of different things going on, and their drones had been evidently utilized in Vietnam, but to try and spare some of our pilots from going down particular alleys and so forth. But after the war was over, all of that was kind of wrapped up. But not at Wright-Patterson. They continued to work on the technology. They founded this organization eventually, and we're actually going through this history at the event. We're doing past, present, and future, and we're doing it graphically. We've got a guy here named Jim Nuttall that is graphically capturing the stories and the ideas and the vision that people have at this event. So I only know this because I was sitting in that session yesterday where we had some of the folks that know the history of the organization. So I don't know all the different pieces to it, but I do know that that has been going on for a long time. We are now on an accelerated curve, and stand back. It's fun.
How did you come to this?
Well, my career has been about promoting technology, and particularly where technology intersects with regulations. And in some instances, we've been using policy and regulations to advance technology. In some instances, like this one, we have been trying to get regulated, as it were, get permission to fly, for example, and now increasingly get permission to have automated vehicles on the road, get the Coast Guard with coal regs to wrap their minds around the potential for this technology as well. So I got involved basically because I love things that fly. I'm a pilot. I love technology. I love the process of figuring out how you go from a technology push to a technology pull, an application pull, and that's really what you see happening. We're right at that moment in time where large end user communities are coming in and saying, got to have it, right? We see the value, we want to incorporate it into our business model, and we got to have it. And it's not just commercial side, it's first responders, it's the scientific community, et cetera. Everybody understands that this is the best way to collect data in many instances, and data is going to be king. As Brian Krasanich said this morning, data is the new oil.
It's a beautiful bit of phraseology. The part that's interesting about this industry right now is, we wake up in the morning, we take a look at the news feeds for the day, and it is a rare day when we don't see a new implementation for unmanned technology. And I'm just all kinds of things. I'm a student of history as well, but more important, I've got a phenomenal love for science fiction, where anything's possible. And even was friends with a number of the major authors through Jerry Purnell and Bob Heinlein and a number of others. And I don't think they could have possibly envisioned what we're seeing now, and more important, what we're going to see just in the next few years. How do you, running AUVSI, try to keep a world view of everything? I mean, the so-called God view of this must be breathtaking.
Well, I certainly don't have that. I spent a lot of time thinking about technologies that will enable across domains. I think that's really, it's a good filter to put these things through. And as an advocate, as somebody who thinks about how do we get the regulators and the legislators and the general public to appreciate this, it's really important to basically be able to learn in one domain and scale it across domains. So again, that was part of the idea of having Intel speak this morning. Their Mobileye acquisition was a good example of them acquiring technology. Brian Krasanich talked about some of the technologies that they've been developing in-house that scale across these. There's ground robotics, there's maritime applications, things that fly. So that's the way I look at it. I look at all things unmanned is our catchphrase for think broad, think big, and think transformational.
From where you sit right now, where are the greatest opportunities and where are the greatest cautions? What interests you or intrigues you the most for the future of this industry? What concerns you the most?
Well, on the air side, we're clearly at that stage now where these communities that I've been talking about, I mean, we think about them as vertical end users, right? Law enforcement or first responders are kind of a vertical end user. The military is an end user, a vertical end user. But now you've got agriculture. Okay, we've seen that one coming for a long time. Construction's big, mining is big. All these different folks, utilities for energy delivery and so forth. How can we get them to learn from each other? And I'm seeing that. Again, that was part of the design of this year's show. Let's get these people talking to each other. Let's get the early adopters talking to each other. Let's face it, if you're doing vertical infrastructure is vertical infrastructure in many respects. Right? Not a whole lot of difficulty with that now under the regulations, so easy for folks that are inspecting cell towers to learn from people that are inspecting flare stacks, et cetera, et cetera. And more importantly, we need them to share information about, hey, I just got permission to fly in this airspace with these mitigations, or got this waiver with these mitigations. How did you do that, right? So that we can get more people to benefit from that. So I see that is the real opportunity now to really get this thing accelerating. And it's not just the commercial opportunities, but I think the commercial opportunities, it's got to be sustainable over time. There's not a lot of people making the right amount of money yet. That's not sustainable over time. We have to get people making money. So it's really about getting people through that early adopter stage into more and more people using things. On the cautionary side, right now we've got a hard stop on regulation because of we haven't yet gotten the notice of proposed rulemaking out for flight over people. That's unfortunately something we have got to get beyond, and we've got to get beyond it by essentially reordering our priorities and moving beyond anonymous flying. Right? People have got to be able to identify themselves. Local law enforcement that are really big on this technology, they want to use the technology, just like our firefighters do, the law enforcement people do. They have to be able to identify what's an authorized drone. Right? I'm on this kick now of getting us beyond the no drone zone to the authorized only drone, because there's going to be a lot of places where the people that are on site don't want drones randomly flying through their airspace, but they need to be able to use drones. So, Tappan Zee Bridge project is a good example. They approached me not too long ago. The security guys approached me for this multi-billion-dollar project. Their construction people need to use drones. They're using drones to rebuild the Tappan Zee Bridge. They don't want anybody else flying in there, anywhere near their construction, for a very good reason. Right now, the local law enforcement have no idea what's an authorized drone, what's not an authorized drone. So that's a cautionary tale right now, and concern about nefarious use, I think, will abate once we have the ability to identify drones. That's authorized, that one you want to pay attention to.
The FAA's actions in regards to the aviation side of the unmanned community have certainly been interesting over the last year. To a certain extent, we were waiting for them to embrace the industry, and boy, are they here now. There's been an interesting genesis in regards to what it took to get them to the table, and now that they're at the table, how that conversation is proceeding. Not to put you too much on this spot, but if you were going to give them a report card, how would you grade the FAA right now, and where is there room for improvement?
Well, I'm going to decline to grade the FAA. I'm about to have lunch with the administrator, and he's probably watching. So, no, I would grade the FAA pretty well. But I think generally speaking, it's not just about the FAA anymore. So I think that's the key thing, is understanding the FAA. I think, I mean, from the top down, from Administrator Hoyer on down, have adopted a vastly more collaborative approach to this. Which is how we roll in AUVSI as well. So
there's been a real culture change there, hasn't there?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's, and I'm not inside the FAA, so I'm going to take their word for it that they're changing their culture. But it's not just the FAA. Right now, the Department of Justice, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security. We had some of their key officials here yesterday. There are concerns. So we need to address those concerns. We need to work with the FBI. We need to work with the Department of Justice that they answer to. We need to work with DHS, et cetera, and the FAA. So those are the kinds of things. It's almost becoming much more of a roundtable approach to getting the industry's collaboration. There tends to be, not by the FAA, but there tends to be a little bit of a view that industry is a problem. Maybe even the FAA is moving a little bit too quick. And I've been reminding people, the industry is going to bring you the solutions. That's what we do in aviation. The industry, helps with the problem and the challenge sets. We bring the solutions to the table, and then we work with the regulators to basically codify all of that. If industry is tagged as the problem, when it's really the fact that the technology is moving so fast, I've been basically saying, let's be sure we've got our focus on the right challenge here, because you don't blame the thermometer if it's cold outside, right? and there's some agencies that are kind of doing that right now. So it's really important for us at AUVSI to point out, this is a little bit like the internet. We're not going to close down the internet because somebody just stole my identity, right? But there are tools that I can use to protect my identity when I go out on the internet. There's antivirus software. We have to have all of that. Right? We need to be demonstrating the value of our technology, and we need to be providing the tools that allow for those who are dedicated to keeping us all safe the ability to do that.
Sounds like we've got a lot of work ahead of you. We're on the issue of federal preemption. It seems like not only does every day bring a new generation of ideas, but also a new generation of rules, from the Okefenokee Swamp or Tootieville in the middle of nowhere. They've all got drone regs now. They're all concerned about the future. They have no clue as to what's going on. How do we build a cohesive regulatory environment where the rules don't change every 150 yards?
Local dialogue. Really, that's been working for us. But yeah, that's where we've got a lot of work to do, because it's pretty easy to get suckered in by a negative narrative about, I even heard one last week that, this technology is putting people out of work, right? I was scratching my head going, well, you probably haven't seen our forecasts, and I don't think that that's true at all. Of course, when new technology comes in, it's very disruptive. So, if I'm a member of a taxi union, I probably don't like Uber a lot. But if people like the services that Uber provides, they're going to buy those services, and that might not necessarily be good for a taxi union, which could be a real political problem for a local municipality. So we have to be sensitive to that and foster that local conversation, so that people can see, oh, yeah, there's a constituency here that really wants to utilize this technology. For us, the interesting part about our new initiative called the Remote Pilots Council is that we get people in the room, and people are dying to talk to each other, particularly local law enforcement. They want to know, okay, who's flying out there? What do you guys know? Are you a 4,000-hour pilot that was a former jet jockey? And, can read a sectional in your sleep, or you're somebody who doesn't spell Part 107 yet. You know, and we've got all of those people now flying commercially. So fostering that local conversation has really been working quite well. And it's really hard to beat back ill-advised legislation or municipal rules, et cetera, unless people know, okay, how do I find out more about this? Right? They're going to go to a negative narrative if they don't understand it. We have a challenge to educating people. Sure, there's an over-the-top message that AUVSI provides, but there's nothing that can replace that local conversation, and that's what we're trying to foster increasingly.
That being the case, it seems like the role that AUVSI will play will evolve extensively, but how does the rank and file community, the commercial operator, the folks that are depending on those commercial operators, how do they interface with AUVSI to build a better environment for not just the industry, but for Joe drone pilot or Jane real estate agent or whatever the case may be that are using this technology?
Well, first off, you know, that local conversation doesn't supplant the need for us to be getting regulations you know, at the national level and at the international level. And there's going to be a really important announcement here shortly that I'm participating in with ICAO. So there's a lot of things that are moving forward on an international basis as well. You know, we're looking for where those gaps are. We had a fascinating discussion in Denver. There was a member from Denver TRACON there who was the guy that designed the airspace. Right? He even put the tools up so that we could see, you know, here's my challenge in trying to integrate UAS into the airspace. And he was doing that in good faith, very constructively explaining, you know, what the opportunities were. And there was a guy there who had put in for permission to fly in Class D airspace, hadn't gotten that. And this was a very sophisticated pilot. He knew what he was doing. And the guy said, I remember that application, I approved that, but it didn't get approved back in Washington. And no clarity on why it wasn't approved in Washington. So there's the gap. I mean, this is going to be team sport going forward. I think it starts with that local conversation. It's got to marry up to what's happening in federal regulations. And you know, you notice I didn't really answer your question about sovereignty of the airspace. You know, that's going to be evolving. I mean, there's going to be a role for folks that are at the local level, because all of the flying is essentially going to be local, at least for smalls. For larger platforms, it's a more nuanced discussion. But we are trying to find where that balance is. And I'd like to say, you know, the FAA owns the airspace, everybody does what the FAA says, but I don't think that really is the right way to go about this. I think the right way to go about this is to make sure that the benefits to the people that want to use this technology are clear. The benefits not just to the commercial entities and the value add in an economic context, because there's a lot of that, but also the societal benefits. What about your first responders? How are they going to benefit from this technology? And then we roll it up, right? So that's, you know, AUVSI is a unique organization in that we have organizational members as well as individual members, and they're all welcome. Right? That's why we have chapters. We've got more and more of those that are spawning around this idea of a remote pilots council to specifically foster that kind of a local conversation.
The amount of work ahead of you is staggering, but one of the areas that I think has the potential to be the most problematic long term is the public perception of what's happening with unmanned technology. From somebody who reads the news every day and writes the news every day, there's no question in my mind that society is changing, and changing for the better in so many ways. I have my whole family outside of me is in medicine, and they are salivating at what they're going to be able to do down the line in regards to being able to supply an accident scene, or for that matter to get something from one hospital to another, or for that matter a friend of mine who's a combat medic, and the stuff they're talking about right now is beyond belief, especially when they're flying unmanned K-Maxes around right now that can basically take a whole bunch of troops at one time. Yeah. It's an extraordinary idea, but the public perception is still really cautious and at times somewhat destructive.
But we have that with virtually every technology you can name.
Yeah.
You know, from the automobile on forward, and you know, if we go back further than that. This industry, I think our biggest challenge is it can scale so quickly. Right? That's really the piece that makes it somewhat more unique than some of the predicates that we have out there that we've learned from in the past. There's demand. Right? There's very interesting meeting, you know, 2 weeks ago right here in Dallas of Uber Elevate, where they're talking about electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles that you and I can climb in and autonomously fly us through a corridor to get from point A to point B. A corridor that's really congested on the ground. Who doesn't like this idea? So, and frankly, they've won me over with the partners that they've got and the fact that, you know, electric motors are very reliable and they have multiple things. But, you know, that is something that it took me a second to wrap my head around that. I had to sit through 3 days, and some of the presentations were highly, highly technical.
But you came out a believer, didn't you?
I came out a believer. And you know what? It's a simple extension of the things that are going on in this hall right behind us. It's converging with a lot of other things that, frankly, I think are going to revolutionize the way we move people and goods generally, and it's going to revolutionize aviation over time.
One of the things I learned working with XPRIZE for a decade plus was that ultimately, when you looked at the big picture, there was no downside to disruption. That things were going to change anyway, but the most disruptive technologies ultimately produce the greatest result from a number of standpoints. Our world will change as a result of unmanned. Where do you see now AUVSI's mission changing or being shaped as you embrace what's going to be the most disruptive technologies going into the future?
Well, we're convener. We get, that's really what this event is. We convene people from a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different technology areas of expertise come together and think about not just what does that vision look like, but how do we make it practical, how do we make it sustainable, how do we make it economically viable, right? And so it's, you know, last year we had John Chambers here. You know, 2 years ago it was Jeff Bezos. Now we've got Brian Krzanich talking about, you know, data is the new oil. It's, you know, people respond to that. It galvanizes the entire community. We have the great privilege at AUVSI of convening that, right? And then figuring out, all right, now how do we break that down into bite-sized pieces, you know, rack it, stack it, make sure we're handling the priorities in the right way. We didn't have identification, you know, in the right sequence for drones. We got a lot of people flying out there, an increasing number of drones flying out there that are that are anonymous. That's not going to work, right? That's creating pushback from people who we want to actually embrace this technology. So, you know, okay, let's go to work on that. AUVSI, at the request of the FAA, requested white papers for identification. 40 to 50 showed up inside of 2 weeks.
Wow.
Some of them, you know, really sharp ideas, not surprisingly. So, you know, that's the role that we'll continue to play. How it looks 5 years from now, I don't entertain the conceit that I'm smart enough to know that.
About the time you make a guess, the future will prove you wrong, and it'll be even more than you expected.
We're just going to keep evolving. You know, it's stay on your toes and try and keep up.
And finally, walked into the show, been here setting up for a couple of days and watching this floor come to life this morning. Been to a number of the previous expositions between Orlando and Atlanta and New Orleans and so forth. This is a big show. It's a bigger show even than last year, and it's not only perceptibly or measurably, it feels that way. Yeah. What's happening there?
Well, it's the expansion. You know, the show used to be military. It was a military foundation, and it's expanded to the commercial side, and there are other elements as well. I mentioned counter already, but just, you know, identification, tracking, detection, all these types of things are coming into the mix. So that's what we're seeing. We actually replace a high number of people at this show every year. We have a high number of new people that come to this show, and I think that has been a function of, you know, the early stage for many of the uses of the technology. But I think, you know, if you think this is big, I think we're now on an accelerated growth curve where we're going to be even more limited about in terms of where we can stage this event, which is a good problem to have, frankly. And
Denver
we're
next year?
to have it. Denver is next year. That's correct.
It's a great
that's
location.
It's going to be fun. There's a lot of flying going on in Colorado, just like here in Texas. So, but hey, let's get through Texas first and make sure we squeeze all the juice out of this particular orange.
Final question for anybody out there who's curious about the unmanned community: how do they reach out to AUVSI, and how can they participate?
Well, there's a lot of different ways. There's AUVSI.org, of course, and we have the foundation as well. I'm going to speak specifically to the younger people. We've got robonation.org, which is run by my colleague, my predecessor once removed, Earl Davidson. Does a great job with that, the competitions that they have. So that's folks that are coming up that are interested in robotics generally, in all the different domains. We have competitions and a lot of really engaging information. And then we've got Know Before You Fly, which is a project that we did in partnership with the Academy of Model Aeronautics and the FAA. So, and it now has 100 partners, which is great because we're getting that word out increasingly through all kinds of channels. So lots of different ways to reach out, or you can just write me, bwynne@auvsi.org.
There you go. Want to reach the boss, that's the way to do it. Brian, we really appreciate your time here.
Glad you're here.
Live at XPONENTIal 2017.
Aero-News Network's coverage of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International's XPONENTIal 2017, live from Dallas, Texas, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.
Let Patrick Neal and Associates provide the legal expertise needed to navigate the commercial UAS industry. Whether it be waivers, exemptions, operational plans, or other issues, we can provide the guidance you need to keep flying and building your successful UAS operation. www.droneattorneys.us.
In collaboration with NASC, introducing Sonex Aerospace, bringing you the Taros Group 4 UAS, the redesigned Tiger Shark Block 4, and the Subsonics Twin Jet UAS, all derived from flight-proven manned systems, not concepts, real aircraft. More at sonexaerospace.com.
Continental Motors Group. Manned and unmanned, Continental has been a pivotal part of aviation and aerospace history and wants to be a part of your mission. Gas or diesel, certified or experimental, Continental is investing in your future. www.continentalmotors.aero